Hello, everybody. This is Parrish Alford with the Northeast Mississippi Daily Journal. We're going to talk some football right now. We're joined by Brandon Zimmerman. He is the Associate News Editor with the SEC Network. Brandon, that sounds really important, man, and I know it is, but why don't you tell us what it is?
Yeah, don't be fooled by the title. So what I do at the SEC Network, I help news gathering, and I work with the shows, broadcasters, to just kind of keep them. 1 second. Okay. So I work with the producers of the shows and the broadcasters of the game to kind of keep them abreast of what's going on news-wise in the conference in terms of suspensions, injuries, that kind of thing, and also kind of help suggest some future ideas and storylines from the games. And in addition to the SEC Now show that we have weekly, kind of work producers of that show and helping them out with elements for that.
Well, if you're in charge of following suspensions and dismissals, there's a little Ole Miss news going on right now, it appears, with Sammy Epps, redshirt freshman tight end, who, according to the Ole Miss Spirit, has been dismissed, and waiting to hear confirmation on that. But I'm sure that Chuck Rounsaville has that right. So anyway, we'll see if Hugh Freeze comments on that. But that is some breaking news right now this morning regarding Ole Miss. Brandon, on the SEC Network a little bit, I was down in Destin for the meetings and heard Mike Slive and so many others sing the praises of the network in its first year and telling us that it was the most successful launch in the history of cable television, not sports television or college sports television, but of cable television. What went into making this so successful from the beginning?
Well, the key was that all the major news carriers, TV carriers, satellite providers, bought into the SEC Network before we launched. And I think what the SEC Network was banking on that their fans created enough noise and put enough ink to tell DirecTV, Time Warner Cable, that if they didn't pick up the SEC Network, they would drop them. And they were right. In the end, right before we got DirecTV and all the major cable carriers picked up the network, and that was huge. So it's now in more than 60 million homes, and obviously that helps out a great deal in making it so successful.
Well, tell us a little bit about SEC Now and just what goes into producing the show and to me, when the network came about and they talked about a traveling game day type show and whatnot on football Saturdays, I mean, that immediately piqued my interest. But there's so much more than that. Tell us a little bit about SEC Now and exactly what that particular program is, and and where it fits into what the network's doing.
You're referring to SEC Now or SEC Nation that goes to the games on Saturday?
Well, I made reference to the game day show, but SEC Now, that's a weekday. That's every day, correct?
Right. So SEC Now is essentially the sports center of the SEC. It's on weeknights, and during basketball and baseball season, it's also on during the weekends. And essentially, we just cover the news of the day, the highlights. Basically, what goes into it is we start the day about 8 hours before we go on with a meeting, and we meet with talent and analysts, and we go over the news of the day and what are the talking points going to be during the show. Are we going to talk about Auburn's rushing offense versus Alabama's rushing defense? This and that, and kind of have those discussions in the meeting, and then the rest of the day is kind of spent planning out the show and getting graphics and highlight packages together, and then by showtime we're ready to go.
When we talk about the launch here, was there any danger about different outlets not picking up the network? I mean, when I look at it on the outside, I think that this is going to be immensely popular. I think that the demand is going to be there, and certainly it played out that way. But was there concern at the beginning that that some of these providers might not get on board?
I would say there wasn't so much concern because I think eventually everyone kind of felt like eventually everyone would get on board. And the fact that there were actually SEC football games being broadcast live on the network is one thing that's something fans can't do without. You know, if their team's playing, they have to watch the game, and that's one thing to where they would make enough noise to either change providers or provider carry it. So yeah, I would say if it didn't happen last summer, it was probably going to happen in the first year, but we were fortunate that it all happened before the launch.
You know, when I think of the SEC network, I think immediately of the games and event coverage and just, you know, a different opportunity for some sports that I wouldn't normally watch or wouldn't have the chance to watch, like softball. But how has the other programming gone over? How has it been received? Obviously, the Feinbaum show is very popular, but just, you know, the other shows, SEC Now and the other things you guys do, how does that fit into ratings relative to event coverage?
Well, obviously, we don't have our ratings. We're not being rated by Nielsen for the first year, but I will say that we do know that all our streaming programs across the SEC Network Plus, that LSU baseball was the most viewed, I guess, event, which was something kind of interesting, but also they've had a great year all around, and their fans are really passionate about baseball. But going back to what I said about the event coverage, I think one thing that is really great for the fans of the SEC for this network is that you can go anywhere really and get SEC football analysis for sports like basketball, baseball, softball. There was really nowhere where you could just watch a half-hour show of people talking about that. You know, outside of Kentucky and Florida basketball, you're not going to get anyone on ESPN talking about Ole Miss basketball or Mississippi State or LSU or anyone else in the conference. So I think that's one unique thing that the network has brought to fans.
SEC football, you know, right around the corner. Media days coming up. Yeah, how do you see the league right now, Brandon? You know, a lot of the questions in Destin. I mean, you know, Nick Saban. It doesn't take much for Nick Saban to act offended in an interview setting, but you know, he seemed bothered that he was asked questions about you know, the health of the SEC, so to speak, with football. I mean, you know, nobody in the championship game last year after that run of 7 BCS titles, haven't won it in the last 2 years. Yeah, how do you see the conference right now with, you know, Ohio State as strong as it is, obviously TCU? Where do you think the SEC fits into the national picture?
Well, right now, I'd say the biggest question with the SEC is quarterback and offense. I mean, you look around the league heading into this year, and no one has an offense that really scares you. And you know, you go back to a couple years ago when the league had all these great quarterbacks: Aaron Murray, Johnny Manziel, you know, all up and down the line, Zach Mettenberger. And you know, last year again, this year, you know, who's really scaring you off? And it's an offensive sport. It's an offensive, you know, game right now. So the SEC, I think that's their weakest point, is that you know, there's not a whole lot of great quarterbacks returning, but you never know. It's a lot of new guys stepping up and into new roles this year. So there could be another Johnny Manziel who comes out of nowhere and kind of surprises us. But I think in the grand scheme of things, that's really if the SEC is going to produce a national champion this year, I think that might be its problem. Which team is going to be the team that has an offense that can score points and compete in the playoffs?
Well, you know, we see this as the era of explosive offenses, as you mentioned. But will the defenses in the league be good enough for the SEC to overcome that, do you think? I mean, you know, if you would look specifically at Ole Miss. I mean, this is a team that led the nation in scoring defense last year, but you know, it just wasn't playing as well at the end of the year. You know, Arkansas scored quite a bit. Then TCU in the bowl game. I look at this Ole Miss defense, and I think it has the potential to be better. There are ways it can be better. They've got to stop the run. Auburn and LSU ran on them pretty well. They were really good in the secondary last year. I think they will be again, but they're going to have two cornerbacks that haven't played college football yet. So there's going to be a learning curve there. What do you think specifically about Ole Miss defensively and the conference as a whole? Can defense overcome the offenses that they'll have to face?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I go back to what I said. The Ole Miss, has a very talented defense, and they return a lot of nice pieces. But again, who are they really going to have to stop in the SEC this year? Obviously, Auburn might be the most imposing offense, but there's a lot of ground. LSU is going to run the ball. Arkansas is going to run the ball. So again, it's not like a few years ago where they have to go out and stop all these great quarterbacks. But again, we'll have to see how that translates once the season's over with the bowl games and the playoff, and see how the SEC will do at the end of the year.
Just looking inside the conference, how do you see the East and the West shaping up?
Well, I think it's the same old story. We've got one side of the conference that's loaded, and the other side have a lot of question marks. And it's funny. I think you could take almost any team from the West last year and put them in the East, and they probably would have won the division. And so this year it's the same thing. You could take any of those teams in the West and in your preseason predictions and just kind of shake it up in the ball, and wherever they fall, it seems about right. But I think going back to the conference strength, one thing that would help the SEC is if at least some of the teams in the East got their act together. They haven't won the conference in a long time. I think going back to maybe Florida in 08. I'm positive off the top of my head. But it's been a while. Florida's been down. Tennessee's obviously been down for a while. Georgia always stubs their toe somewhere along the line. South Carolina is close, and then they kind of back off. But they really need a team in the East to be dominant and challenge the West. And even if you look back at last year's championship game, Missouri in there, and it wasn't a very high-profile game for the conference because Missouri was ranked outside the top 15. They weren't playing for playoff. Everyone knew that they were probably going to get handled pretty easily. And so, if you get back to maybe a team like Georgia in 2012 that had a national championship caliber team playing Alabama in that ranking, if the East can continue or get back to getting a team like that into the game every year, I think it'll make the conference a lot stronger and higher profile. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the East this year. It's fascinating that there's no real clear-cut team that anyone these two teams are going to title game this year. You can pick any of maybe three teams in the East, or maybe 4 or 5 in the West, and you could have an argument for any of those. So in that regard, it's shaping up to be a pretty interesting year.
Looking at the East a little bit, what do you think about Jim McElwain in Florida, and where is this program in trying to rebuild and become that Eastern Division team that really challenges the West?
Yeah, well, Jim McElwain, he's going to have success at Florida, but it's going to take some time. This is probably, if you look back at the past few new Gator coaches, from Spurrier to Meyer to Zook, this is probably the least talented team that any new coach has inherited. He's got a lot of questions on the offensive line, very few playmakers on offense, unsettled at quarterback, like so many teams. And so it's going to be a process for Florida. It's not going to happen here. I think 6, 7 wins would be a good season for them. 8 would be phenomenal. But I think for McElwain to have a successful first season, he needs to kind of show the fans that, hey, I can coach some offense. If they can take what they have, score some points here and there, at least make it fun again. For the Florida fans who've been sort of starved for offense for all these years, I think that'd be a good start if you can start recruiting some playmakers and get his quarterback in there, then maybe we can start seeing Florida get back to being Florida. But it has been an interesting kind of flip-flop in that state to where Florida was dominant for so many years and Florida State was down, and now that's flipped. And so recruiting is going to be tough for him because of Florida State now. And then you've got Urban Meyer and Jim Harbaugh coming down into Florida, recruiting that state pretty heavily. So McElwain's got his work hard.
Ole Miss goes down to Gainesville the first weekend in October. Some people have looked at that as a trap game. Listening to you talk about Florida, I'm wondering how you see that on the schedule. I mean, is that a place that Ole Miss will struggle and possibly lose, or do you think that's just going to be too much for Florida at this time?
I would say Ole Miss got a break in terms of this being the year they have to go back to the swamp. This is definitely a Florida team that's very beatable, and because of the lack of success they've had the last few years, the swamp isn't that crazy environment that it was, for a couple decades there. And as you know well, Ole Miss has had some success down there in Gainesville. But in terms of I think overall, you have to say Ole Miss probably has a good shot. They're probably going to be maybe a slight favorite in that game. They've got, I think they've got a good matchup, and it's going to be. I think it's just going to be a tough year for Florida. But like I said, it was a good time on the schedule for Ole Miss.
Brandon, one more question, man, and we'll let you go. Thank you for being with us today.
Sure.
Just tell me a little bit about Ole Miss, if you would. Just talk about the Rebels, and we've hit on them defensively. I mean, what do you see in this team? Is there too much hype about it right now, or can it be a top 15, a top 10 team at the end of the year, and not just the beginning?
Yeah, I think so. I think the success they had last year was they learned how to win. They learned how to win big games, obviously, and they're coming back in a division I think that's wide open. So I think they have as good a chance as Auburn, Alabama, or anyone else in the West to win that division. And I think. I'm sure all the old fans are excited to see Laquan Treadwell get back and see if he can be as electric as he was last year. And obviously that whole season turned on that one play against Auburn. And so with him back, this has their star on offense. I think they're in position to compete with the West, all the top teams out there.
Brandon, thanks a lot, man. Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure, Parrish. Appreciate it.